Hello, everyone. So, this is going to be another video about Unity, in case you're not sick about hearing about that already. But just because after the last video I made, I've seen a significant increase in the amount of commentary and also of analysis on the subject, so I wanted to do a follow-up. Specifically, I wanted to do the follow-up on the reasoning why Unity did what they did. Now, I know a lot of people, myself included, just filed it under the nebulous reason of greed, which is a thing, yes, but gamesindustry.biz, and this piece here written by Brendan Sinclair, who's managing editor at the website, goes into a lot more detail behind the numbers on this, right? So we're going to be looking at those and also going to be looking at some other knock-on effects on the company that this whole decision is going to have. So we start off by covering the runtime fee and also just the sheer amount of contradiction that Unity has given itself, right? So they started off by saying that an install is defined as the installation and initialization of a project on an end user's device. And then they said that demos, trials, game bundles, and giveaways, like Humble Bundle, do not count as installs. Then they said if it's an early access beta or a demo of the full game, then yes, it will count as an install. They then said that subscription services such as Game Pass do count as an install. Then they said they didn't. And when asked how they were going to track the number of installs, they then said that they have their own proprietary data model that tracks the number of times the runtime is distributed. Bearing in mind one of two problems. One is you do have platforms where you can sell games, such as, like I said, GOG, which do ship the game with, or they ship the games that they sell with no DRM. So is that going to be in violation of that store's policy? And second of all, tracking the number of times that a runtime is distributed is not the same as tracking the number of times a runtime is installed. I mean, honestly, if you look at Unity's response to this entire thing, I mean, first of all, their PR department and their spokespeople they don't seem to know what they're doing at all. When they're asked quite understandably by developers and by press to, well, what do you mean by this? When you say that you're going to be charging us for this, what are the exact circumstances of this? And the responses they're giving gives the impression that they just haven't adequately prepared for this. And I have, I've worked for a very big corporation in the past, and I've seen this kind of response. Like, speaking anecdotally, I've seen this kind of response before. This is a response that really just makes it seem like the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. Decisions are being made and not everyone is privy to those decisions until a problem lands on their desk, and then they have to deal with it, right? So I'm sure at Unity there are people in the PR department who are trying to call people up. They're trying to get clarification, and depending on who you talk to, you can get one of 3 or 4 different possible responses. That's why I want to believe is happening. The other possible explanation is just they're fucking idiots and they don't know what they're doing, which is entirely possible. Let's not give them too much credit here, but that's me being charitable, right? And yeah, I just want to get to the stats because, like I said, when Unity made this announcement for the runtime fee, it really just leapt out to me how stupid the decision is, right? Considering the level of market dominance that Unity, well, I was going to say has, but let's be honest, it's now had. Why would you make that announcement? Why would you burn it to the ground? Now, gamesindustry.biz has done a fair amount of statistic gathering, and it really paints a very interesting picture. They've calculated Unity's lifetime debt as being $2.6 billion, right? That's a deficit accumulated over 19 years of operations, a figure they got by combining the $2.2 billion lifetime debt of its last annual report with the reported $447 million net losses reported in the first 2 quarters of this year. And that's double their total amount of deficit when you consider that at the end of 2021, it was $1.3 billion. Unity has never had a profitable quarter in its history. It has posted modest operating profits in the past 3 quarters for the first time ever, But to quote the article, I imagine there are lots of businesses whose books look a lot better if you ignore income taxes, depreciation of property and equipment, amortization of intangible assets, millions in restructuring costs associated with laying people off because you think it's a healthy habit to get into. I think last time I checked, they'd fired, like 900 people? And of course, stock-based compensation. And let's focus on the stock-based compensation, right? So over the past 3 quarters, Unity has paid $494 million in stock-based compensation. This will be to its executives, to people at the company that instead of taking a fiscal wage entirely, will be reimbursed with stock in the company. And I bet these people are thrilled right now, right? So they've paid out almost $500 million in stock-based compensation. Over those same 3 quarters, they made $152 million in profit. That's huge. That's more than, how much they're paying just in compensation to their executives is more than double what they made in profit. This company is hemorrhaging money. Absolutely hemorrhaging money. So there has been some coverage of recent stock sales made by Unity CEO John Riccitiello, with the implication that it was insider trading because he knew the runtime fee would go over like a lead balloon and sink the stock price. The author here said, "I would stop short of saying he would never do this. He was, after all, president of EA during a span when the SEC reportedly investigated the company for stock options backdating, although apparently this was a thing in the games industry as a whole at the time. They will point out that the vast majority of Riccitiello's pay at Unity comes in the form of stock and stock options, and the reported amount he sold is almost negligible compared to what he would have left. So his total compensation last year, the whole year, is $11.8 million, but the actual cash part of that was just $308,000, right? The insane majority of how much reimbursement Riccitiello himself gets from being the CEO of Unity is in the form of stock and stock options, not in terms of pay. The man's in San Francisco. I mean, I'm gonna play him. I'm gonna play him a song on the world's smallest violin here. But I do realize that when you're in the San Francisco tech bubble, there's guys out there that would not wipe their ass with $400,000 a year, right? Like they just wouldn't even get out of bed for that. So yes, he was selling stock in the run up to that, as were all the executives, but that stock is pretty much, it seems that's where the majority of their reimbursement comes from for being on the board of executive. And this is an interesting point here. When we spoke to Riccitiello last year about Unity's decades-long bubble bath in red ink, he explained it was simply the company's strategy, where it took losses in order to fuel growth. Quote, "Should you be profitable? Well, we could be, but we wouldn't be serving the industry in the ways we do now. Our market shares wouldn't have increased." End quote. Riccitiello noting that Unity's market share went from the low teens to over 70% as a result of the strategy. And there is some truth to this. I mean, according to Unity themselves, 88% of the top 1,000 games are using Unity as part of their growth and their growth strategies and their development. And to quote them, there's the source data.ai, top 1,000 games is top 1,000 gaming apps by downloads in the previous 4 weeks from data.ai as of February 2023. So Unity is really enjoying a massive market dominance at the moment. Quote, "Avoid references to markets or market shares or dominance," end quote. A Google internal document surfaced by the Justice Department this week in its antitrust trial against the search giant, as reported by Bloomberg. The company has spent decades coaching employees to avoid certain words and phrases since they can be red flags for monopolistic behavior. And now to put our business caps on here, the emphasis on growing market share is understandable, but companies don't exist to grow market share, they exist to earn money. Market share is just a means to that end. You're only really going to be willing to lose billions to build your market share if you know you can take it all back and then some down the road. And I think that's what we're seeing here. First, you make yourself essential to the market, even if it costs you billions to get there. Then, once you hit a threshold, let's say, 70% of the market, you lean into the, and I'm quoting games industry here, the enshittification process. Charge more for your services, you give your customers worse terms, you turn the heat up slowly and continuously, confident in the knowledge that people are so locked into your business and have so few viable alternatives that they may grumble, but they will ultimately put up with it. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? Just not use Unity? Are your developers familiar with alternative engines? The competition for top talent is already fierce. How much tougher will it be if you're hiring for a proprietary engine? Jump to something like Unreal. How do you know Epic won't do the exact same thing once you're invested in their software? See a lot of developers talking about Godot, but I also see developers talking about Linux whenever Microsoft pulls some underhanded shenanigans of Windows, and that doesn't seem to have cracked the OS market wide open. Yes, and I think the articles hit the nail on the head. So, Unity has been hemorrhaging money. They've been working tirelessly to build up to this insane level of market dominance that they now currently enjoy. And specifically as well, not just in like the PC gaming space, not just in the console gaming space, the mobile gaming space. You know, that's huge, right? I talked about this in the last video. When you look at the number of installs and downloads of Unity games over mobile gaming, you know, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, if you're a red-blooded pro gamer, I'm sure you don't think that those baby video games on cell phones are worth thinking about. But you know, if you're in the real world, you have to recognize that, I think last I checked, it's something like half the global gaming industry is on mobile. If you have a dominance in the mobile gaming space, that's a lot of installs, that's a lot of downloads, and if you're Unity, it's a lot of money. You know, we're looking at Call of Duty Mobile, we're looking at Pokemon Go, like the game that was as huge as it was a couple years ago, you know, kind of before lockdown, Marvel Snap. I mean, are they going to rebuild their games to avoid that cost? Unity lit money on fire for decades to buy a market advantage that overrules the basic economic incentives that supposedly ensure free markets work best for customers. It was successful in doing that because it's very hard for a sustainable business to compete against one that is fine losing billions of dollars. That's what we're seeing here, right? They are making a gamble here. They're not taking much in the way of financial compensation, and not just John Riccatello. You know, I know I kind of singled him out last video. It's not just him, right? It's the other executives at the top. They're all doing it. Not getting paid as much. They're getting a lot of stock because they know that when they gain this market advantage that they have now, and then they make their product insanely shit but highly profitable, that stock value will skyrocket. It will skyrocket and it will take them to the moon. That's what they're banking on. And it's a common strategy, right? We're not even giving Unity points for originality here. It's such a common strategy in so many industries today that there's just no sense of horror or outrage from the onlookers. Industry watchers and serious business people have seen this play out so many times, they just acknowledge it's happening and treat it as if it's a perfectly cool and normal thing to do and not illegal predatory pricing. Quote, pricing below your own costs is not a violation of the law, as it is part of a strategy to eliminate competitors. When that strategy has a dangerous probability of creating a monopoly for the discounting firm, so that it can raise prices far into the future and recoup its losses. End quote. That's the FTC saying that. Strategy is basically illegal, but courts are reluctant to agree with that. And they know that as well, right? This is what's insidious, okay? Quote, the market's reaction to the blowback that Unity is receiving from the developer community may be overdone, particularly as developers have few lower-cost options to turn to. Given the utility provided by Unity Solutions and its dominant market share within mobile gaming, do not anticipate a rush for the exits from its core customers, end quote. As in a note to investors on Wednesday, Wedbush analyst Michael Pachter says Unity should be fine because the market lacks viable competitors. And money people agree with this as well, right? Quote, when it comes to fair, it usually depends on who you ask. From Unity, and likely its shareholders' point of view, it has technically been subsidizing developers' work, i.e. operating a substantial GAAP basis loss, every year since inception. In a guest column from media researchers Carol Severin, it suggests it should be seen as fair for Unity to add this runtime fee because it has lost so much money over the years. The thing is, there's a difference, right? Unity deliberately chose to lose money to build its market share. Set the terms and the prices for developers every step of the way, knowing they would not be profitable. Developers did not choose the strategy for Unity, so Unity cannot insist that they now make the company whole. Unity also never told developers this was an exchange. Sweetheart deal now in exchange for Unity putting the screws to them later. In fact, that was the opposite of the sales pitch. I think this is where Unity is potentially going to be in trouble, right? Quote, there's no royalties, no fucking around, it's simple, end quote. In 2015, John Riccitiello talks to us about the new Unity business model, contrasting it to the royalty-based model Epic had announced the day before for its Unreal Engine. So he was deliberately pitching this engine to developers saying, we're not going to fuck you over. To quote him again, I do think you could argue that royalties are quite a bit like free-to-play. They sort of hook you in and then try to exploit that relationship. That's not what we're trying to do, end quote. That's exactly what you've done, John. It's exactly what you've done. If you were to walk around Unity, you'll find this point about transparency, clarity. Democracy is like every other paragraph of every other conversation. It's a deeply embedded value. Thought for a while about things like royalties, but we just didn't think it was right. We thought about the nickel and dime model of free-to-play, not to implement it, just to see whether it had any implications for us, but we didn't think so, end quote. It's... Unity themselves will say we've been operating at a loss, so it's time for the developers to give back to us. That's not how this works. And to quote Riccitiello one more time, this is on the no royalties, no fucking around interview. With Unity, it's capped. It's $75 a month or $1,500 for a perpetual life. We're not nickel and diming people, and we're not charging them a royalty. We say it's free, it's free. We say it's $75 a month, it's $75 a month. Yeah, you can buy other stuff from us. We're not a one-trick pony, but we're not charging a royalty, which I think is akin to looking for whales, end quote. And to quote the article here, I don't know what's more hypocritical. Telling people you're not nickel and diming them, and then explicitly nickel and diming them per install fees that range from 2 dimes to a fraction of a nickel, or throwing shade on whale hunting when you have spent years making tools to help whale hunters hunt whales better, and in the midst of pivoting towards whale hunting yourself. Quote, price increase is very targeted. In fact, more than 90% of our customers will not be affected by this change, end quote. That's from one of their many quote-unquote clarifications this week. Unity says the runtime fee was designed in such a way that will bring in a lot of money from a relative handful of its biggest customers. Do you know what we call that? We call those fucking whales. But let's drill down deeper. You know, we're in the Unity minds now, and we're following that seam of understanding, right? One angle I find interesting here, to quote the article, I find this interesting as well, is that Unity had alternative methods of enshittification could have resorted to that would not have resulted in the same blowback. Could have jacked up the cost of its subscriptions a bit and gestured at inflation. Plenty of companies doing that. I mean, every industry in the world is doing this at the moment. Times are tough, inflation, you got to cover. People would complain, but people probably wouldn't have been as upset. Part of it seems to be a way to upsell developers to get them even more deeply invested in Unity's ecosystem. They can reduce their runtime fees by upgrading their subscription program, or using Unity Gaming Services LiveOps backend solution, or Unity Level Play, which is the Iron Source ad monetization platform, which would be an appealing way to increase Unity's market share in other services that it can then enshittify down the road. Yeah. Not only are they looking to make more money, they're looking to gain even more of a market dominance so they can put the screws on you even fucking harder in another 5 or 10 years. That's the play here. We already know Unity management are big believers in AI, and if companies really can use tech to cut headcount, which Unity themselves have been doing, like I said, they've been firing people left and right, they'll not only be paying fewer salaries, but fewer Unity seat license fees. So if Unity expects its existing unprofitable model to be disrupted, it's naturally going to want to adopt a better model suited to the industry landscape of the future. And, internally they have some stats that they believe back this up, right? They're anticipating that they're going to see more mobile-only games compared to 2021. 44%. The increase in mobile-only games made by large studios, that's studios of over 300 people, the report found a slight decline in such projects from mid-sized studios, those are 10 to 49, while other size of studios saw an increase in mobile-only game development. Yeah, I feel like this trend is being pushed by like your big gacha whale games. These are going to be your Honkai Impacts, your Genshin Star Rails, your dicky machine gun butt games. Yeah, like it's gonna be these, right? Like these high budget, high aggressively monetized gacha games. The runtime fee policy is designed with free-to-play games most obviously in mind. It makes no distinction between monetization models, but it's pretty clear what the upside is considering a free-to-play hit can result in 1 billion downloads, while an absurdly successful premium game like Grand Theft Auto 5 has been running strong for a decade and still shipped 185 million copies. If those two numbers sound similar to each other, you don't know how big a billion is. Unity does not care. When Unity makes this decision, they do not care about small indie games. These developers that are pushing the anti-Unity charge at the moment, they're not looking at them. They're looking at big free-to-play mobile games built in Unity. That's where they're going to make their money. In 2020, to quote them, 2022, there were more players but fewer payers, end quote. That's from Unity's 2023 gaming report. Last year, daily active users went up 8% year over year for the median game, while the rates of paying active users went down 2% for the top 50th percentile. It may not sound like a ton, but if you pull back to include games in the 90th percentile, the decline in the rate of paying active users was 30%. The average dollar value per transaction was also down 8% for the top 50th percentile, 17% for the top 90th. What does this mean? That's a lot of numbers. That's a lot of business stuff. The number of people playing free-to-play mobile games is massively ballooning. The number of people paying in those, or the amount of revenue to be made from in-app purchases, is going down. When you look at that, charging developers on a per-install transaction fee suddenly makes way more sense. I'm just going to finish off this article before I offer a few more of my. So, I don't think these trends are necessarily going to have a massive effect for Unity's business, but the runtime fee plan strikes me as an optimization for them. A way to improve Unity's outlook whether the industry evolves this way or that. Honestly, I think this new runtime fee makes perfect sense from a mile-high point of view. Think of Unity as a business where you just turn whichever dials and pull whatever levers make the numbers go up the most. The only problem is it makes no sense at all if you think about Unity as a game development tool that game developers would want to use. Yeah, so I've talked about the trust thermocline, right? So for those that aren't familiar, if you look at say an iceberg in the water, there's something called the thermocline, right? So an iceberg can take a certain amount of heat and remain largely intact, but when the heat reaches a certain point, it starts to very rapidly melt. Trust is the same way. Okay. And trust is the one thing that you want, is so paramount in game development, especially with the choice of engine, right? Consider that you're a game developer. Okay. You're getting, especially if you're an indie developer, but really any developer, you're getting ready to make a video game that is a labor that will take you years, in some cases potentially decades, depending. And one of the most core aspects of that is the choice of engine, right? It is not easy to port a game from one engine to the other. In some cases, I think it's functionally impossible. So you need to know that you can trust the engine you're building the game in, especially if you're looking to sell it. The fact is that Unity sweet-talked developers by telling them, I really think what they thought they wanted to hear, which is that we're offering you an engine that will not try to fuck you over. When a lot of developers went, hey, that sounds great, and they signed up, they then fucked them over, which is despicable. John Riccatello is an easy target. He's not the only guy. He's not the only guy. You want to see everyone involved in this? This is Unity themselves. This is Unity themselves laying these people out. We have John. We have Luis Felipe Vizoso, Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. Mark Whitten, President of Create. Tomer Bar-Zeev, President of Grow. Carol Carpenter, Scott Pitaski, Irma Gupta, Clive Downey, Luke Bartholet, and Jessica Lindell, and a million other fucking faceless business people. All right, it's these fucking vampires at the top of this company that have made this decision. They decided they wanted to dominate the gaming industry, and then they had everyone on board. They then put the fucking thumb screws on you. All right, John's an easy target because John's a fucking idiot, but they're all at it. And Unity themselves, their first value that they have, users first. Put users first. They're rock stars and we're their biggest fans. Yeah, get fucked. Get fucked. Anyway, I think that's enough of me getting angry. So, I think I'll leave it there. That's why they made this decision. That's it. Those are just my thoughts. I'll be linking the article in the description. I highly recommend you check it out. I only showed a little bit of it, and it's very insightful and quite brutally funny at some points. It's a very good article. I think Brendan did a very good job writing it. Let me know what you think. If you've got any thoughts, you've got anything to add, please add it. In regards to personal thoughts about this, Unity, I think, is too big to really feel as much pain from this as they should. But I think it's functionally killed it in the indie sphere. I can't see indie developers just aren't going to be going for this anymore. Whether or not this translates into Unity starting to lose its market dominance, I don't know. If it does, I think we might see executives start to jump ship. But what they'll do is they'll wait until their stock price like peaks, and then they'll start selling it even faster. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you on the next one, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you very much. So, does anyone know any sea shanties?
Do we know any sea shanties?
Yeah.
Who said that? Who said that?
It was Sue.
Who said that?
What happened?
It was Sue. Sue said it.
Who said
Come
what?
over here. Come over here. Come over here.
We have a Skelebrick. Skella
Is he doing a
only
full
music
hands
that I
on
allow
ship?
on my
He
ship
is.
is either Miley Cyrus or Shania Twain.
prepare.
Do you understand?
Understand.
Do you understand me?
I
now,
understand.
as a result of you suggesting this nonsense, I need you to go ahead and sing me a Shania Twain song right now as I sing the Skeleton Galleon. Right now! Figure it out! Figure it out!